Under the cosmic dominion, humanity was in a state of increasing despair because everything had been taken away by the repressive government. Humans are reduced to shadows of their previous selves because of the freedom's cultural resources. The abuse and humiliation persisted for decades, causing many people to repress their rage for the sake of survival. Yet the human spirit was not unabated by such suppression. A reservoir of rage was born by the battered, waiting to be released. That moment was unanticipatedly brought on by a catastrophic incident that made it hard to overlook the catalyst. Because the collective outrage of humanity was a compilation of injustices rather than a single act, but it was a tipping point, appeared after the Dominion carried out a crime that rocked the dispersed human settlements. This was not merely another case of exploitation, but a purposeful act of cruelty intended to frighten and guarantee obedience. Rather, it brought about the killing of innocents, which perhaps the loss of a whole community or the destruction of a treasured cultural relic served as a rallying cry. Weep. The feelings the incident elicited, such as anger, grief, and an unwavering desire for justice, were more important than the specifics of the incident. Just as word of the incident spread, the divided halves of mankind started to come together in a way that had never been witnessed before. Prior to the Dominion's operations, which were meant to suppress resistance, they created an unprecedented human channels to speak with the oppressed on different worlds, forming an unbreakable bond. Expressing their rage and plans to rebel against technology that was previously utilized for surveillance and control turned into a coordinating tool. This change signaled the start of a new era in which people no longer refused to accept their fate as oppressed beings. Despite their initial organized, leaders, not politicians or military personnel, started to emerge. Strategists, but regular people with a remarkable resolve to fight. Together, engineers, miners, scientists, and farmers combined their expertise and resources. The uprising was founded not on the might of weaponry, but rather on the strength of human ingenuity in situations where humans lacked access to superior technology. Using the very technology intended to oppress them, they devised improvised methods to interfere with the Dominion's operations. The initial indications of resistance were minor, and they were used as weapons against their captors. These seemingly insignificant acts of sabotage interfered with communication in supply routes. Small groups of people started to vanish from the Dominion's control once networks were breached, only to reappear as audacity builders. These acts, which were a part of an expanding underground movement, were disregarded as insignificant by the ruling class. Annoyances, but for people. Every act of resistance was a triumph that brought them one step closer to recreating their honor, was about returning what had been taken from them, not about returning what had been taken from them, not about revival. This increasing opposition was spurred by their mutual understanding that the Dominion was not only bitter against a friend, but against everything. Its vastness now seemed to be infallible. The Empire's dependence on rigid systems was a weakness that left it open to humans' capacity and feelings that Western technology might not be accomplishing it. Humans competing for power with different sections, like the Dominion Legion themselves, came together to fight a battle. Operations, the benefits of preserving human dominance, started to outweigh the costs, compelling the rulers to recognize the mounting threat. But, in contrast to planned rebellions, this resistance was distinct due to the emotional component. Unlike other species, the unbridled fury that propelled humanity's revolt. Emotion united people from different planets and became both a weapon and a shield. Overcoming geographical and cultural barriers gave them the fortitude to persevere. Struggles and the bravery to confront insurmountable obstacles were formerly viewed as a destructive force, served as the cornerstone of their struggle for freedom, and as the dominions expanded, so did the opposition. Annoyance. What they had before written off as individual events now seemed to be a part of a more comprehensive, coordinated operation, Yet, they saw humans as inferior, and their conceit kept them from seeing the extent of the threat. Beings in ink, that may present a significant obstacle. This miscalculation permitted the rebellion to gather steam while working covertly, as the Dominion continued to concentrate on more significant immediate worries. The Resistance's first significant win marked the turning point. This was not a fight won with superior firepower or cutting-edge technology, but with meticulous preparation and sheer determination to achieve defeat of its enemy, such as the destruction of a vital supply or the seizure of a crucial facility. Rout was less significant than its symbolic significance for the first time in human history. Delivered a blow to the Dominion, demonstrating their strength, this triumph sparked optimism among the downtrodden and made it abundantly evident to the rulers that humanity would not be destroyed by the Dominion's reaction. Since more opposition was to be expected, they stepped up their attempts to put an end to the rebellion by deploying additional forces and assets to human-controlled areas. But this oppressive leadership also insisted they keep grouping teams together and act as a community to fight depression. When the tyrant's greatest weapon lost its power, humanity had nothing left. But they were afraid to lose, which became them unstoppable. The resistance kept developing, growing more coordinated, and guerrilla tactics were used in conjunction with effective methods to maximize impact with the least amount of resources. The rebellion spread in order to obstruct the Dominion's operations without engaging in direct combat. Reaching even the most remote human communities around the galaxy, each act of resistance, regardless of how minor it was, humanity was no longer involved in the greater conflict. They were battling for their future and survival against the haughtiness of the Dominions. Their biggest weakness is their incapacity to see humanity, which was formerly their greatest strength. More than a subject species kept them from realizing the extent of the danger they were posing, to depend on brute force's inability to adjust to the conflict's evolving dynamics. Because they were predictable due to their rigidity, the resistance was able to keep ahead of the emotional center of the conflict. Its main strength was disobedience, as opposed to the calculating and frigid tactics of passion, and a strong sense of injustice propelled the Dominion humanity's struggle. This emotional intensity supplied the support and a degree of fortitude that the rulers were unable to match for people. This was not only a fight for freedom, they were battling not just for freedom, but also for identity and survival themselves, but for generations to come who were resolved to make sure that no one would ever have to go through the same hardships as the ultimate success. The success of resistance did not come without a price. Communities lost lives, demolished, and sacrifices made. But every setback only strengthened the determination of those who remained. Humanity's fury, which had hitherto been repressed, had now. The cosmic dominion, which had previously been viewed as an unstoppable force, started to understand that their biggest danger was internal rather than external. They had unleashed an uncontrollable power, and humanity was resolved to hold them accountable for all of the injustices that humanity had endured under the rule of Galactic Domain. There was a steady accumulation of animosity toward the Galactic Dominion as a result of its harsh policies, produced an atmosphere in which there was little hope and survival was the sole objective, yet like any extended suppression, the accumulation of grievances reached a critical mass, and that moment became apparent as instead of shattering humanity's spirit, this incident became the consequence of an act that went beyond the bounds of tolerance. The crucial incident that acted as the catalyst for a rebellion that had been smoldering beneath the surface for a long time. The catalyst for collective resistance embodied all that humanity hated about its oppressors. The episode showed the Dominion's contempt for human suffering, callousness, and hubris. Because humanity had advanced to unprecedented heights, igniting a fury among the underprivileged that grew like wildfire, while the humans saw it as the greatest insult to their dignity, while rulers saw it as just another demonstration of their dominance. This change in perspective brought the dispersed remains of mankind together, providing them with a shared goal and an obvious enemy. There was no quick organizing or rebellion in response to this outrage, but a profound collective understanding that the current situation could not be maintained. People who had previously suffered from rage, grief, and frustration started to discover a way to express themselves, and they defied oppressed in silence, started to voice their displeasure with what began as a solitary. The initial paucity of resources quickly evolved into concerted attempts to destroy the Dominion's activities. Did not discourage them, but rather compelled them to develop resistance, which was based on the defensive techniques which was based on. Despite its infancy, the foundation of resourcefulness, creativity, and resolve, the Dominion did not foresee that humans would be skilled at employing the element of unpredictability that the resistance possessed. Using whatever resources they had at their disposal, they converted outdated technology, ancient wisdom, and even the Dominion systems into tools of resistance that the ruling class was used to using. An opponent that operated outside of their established frameworks of control was too difficult for the overwhelming force to handle. This flexibility turned to become a distinguishing feature of humanity's struggle, enabling them to oppose the Dominion in previously unheard of methods, and the opposition effort was not coordinated by a single leader or organization, but developed naturally from humanity's collective desire. This uprising was decentralized, made it challenging for the Dominion to put an end to it, because it wasn't a localized uprising, but rather a extensive travel across several planets and colonies, as well as communication networks that had messages of hope and solidarity that had previously been used to impose control were transformed into a human lifeline for many who had long thought they were suffering alone as the resistance increased momentum. It started to transform from a disorganized set of rebellious actions into a concerted attempt to destroy the supply chains where the focus of strategic attacks by oppressive structures. The Dominion system's infrastructure and other vulnerabilities were not, though, focus of these initiatives, attaining quick wins but aiming to erode the Empire's hold over humanity with each successful operation. This insight was crucial, regardless of how minor the reminder was, that the Dominion was not unbeatable. The Dominion's response to this was crucial in keeping the rebels' spirits high and inspiring others to join the battle. Growing dissent was foreseeable and ineffective, since they relied solely on intimidation and physical force. Strengthened humanity's determination to put an end to the opposition by mass arrests, public executions, and more, surveillance did not have the desired impact. Rather, these tactics further discouraged insurrection, alienated the populace, and gave the resistance more members, since the rulers couldn't adjust to the problem. The conflict's shifting dynamics revealed a serious flaw in their strategy. The importance of passion in the resistance was among its most important features, in contrast to the Dominion's planned approach in personal tactics. The battle for humanity was driven by intensely personal reasons, such as the rage and frustration of acts of defiance and expression were found after years of oppression, and this emotional intensity gave the Dominion was unable to match the human resistance's tenacity. Was a fight to recover their identity, dignity, and future, as well as a fight for freedom. The stakes were existential, which provided them with the bravery to confront insurmountable obstacles. The expansion of the resistance also brought with it a feeling of human community and purpose, and for the first time in decades, people started to believe in the hopes. This hope was founded on the potential for a better future rather than foolish optimism. The noticeable advancements in the struggle against the Dominion, each act of rebellion, no matter how tiny, was a step in the right direction. This feeling of advancement was essential to sustaining the momentum of the struggle for liberty. Yet, despite obstacles, the rebellion's strength was not limited to its flexibility and fortitude, but also in its capacity to motivate others. The rebels' bravery served as a lighthouse for individuals who had long been resigned to their fate. Tales of disobedience, proliferated throughout the galaxy, inspiring those who had previously believed unable to act. The resistance evolved into a symbol rather than merely a struggle against the dominion of the everlasting spirit of humanity. As the movement grew, it became evident that the Dominion's control was not the inflexible systems that had previously upheld order as absolute as they seemed, were now viewed as authoritative. The opposition took advantage of these flaws, which made the rulers of the empire feel unstable. Who had previously used fear to uphold their authority were confronted by an adversary who was no longer terrified. The struggle reached a turning point when the Dominion's incapacity to adjust to the shifting power dynamics, the rebellion's nature exposed the shortcomings of their strategy. Their conceit had prevented them from seeing the discalculable, their dependence on antiquated techniques of control, and the potential of humanity left them exposed. As they continued to observe, people thought they were unimportant, but the resistance was constantly proving them incorrect. One crucial mistake made by the monarch was his inability to comprehend the conflict's emotional and psychological components would have significant repercussions. The opposition was not without difficulties. Resources were limited, and the communities were uprooted, and many lives were lost as a result of revolt. Yet these sacrifices only enhanced humanity's determination because the uprising was about more than just overthrowing the Dominion. It was also about securing a future. This long-term vision provided the movement with a sense of direction that ensured such tyranny would never occur again. Beyond short-term triumphs, the conflict with the Dominion served as evidence of the might of resilience and solidarity. The capacity of humanity to adjust, invent, and endure amid the one of the rebellion's defining characteristics was its defiance of overwhelming odds, which started as a movement that threatened to upend the empire's foundations, had developed from individual acts of rebellion. Once viewed as an invincible force, the Cosmic Dominion was now forced to face its own reality, vulnerabilities. The galactic community had undervalued the idea of persistent human fury. Dominion made an error that would shortly alter the power dynamics below. Years of oppression were creating a singular manifestation of humanity's unending fury and resolve. This was the expression of a force that went beyond the norm. It wasn't just a rebellion. Resistance, an unstoppable drive to fight, is born out of humanity's collective suffering and rage. A movement that represented their supreme defiance. It wasn't merely symbolic. Was frightening and useful for the Dominion, which is what made this force inevitable. It was founded on sheer, unrelenting hatred, but earlier upheavals throughout the galaxy had been practical, emphasizing resources and tactics. Humanity's battle was distinct from theirs. Anger was not a sign of weakness, but rather a force that turned hopelessness into a remarkable ability to bounce back, and creativity that the Dominion's cold were unable to duplicate or offset. Systematic oppressive systems that had long depended on control and terror, but those weapons were useless against a foe whose goals were based on retaliation and survival. This force did not appear suddenly. Rather, it was the outcome of decades of injustice, humiliation, and suffering. These collective experiences started to form, bringing the disparate human resistance together to create something much bigger than the sum of parts. In addition to being organizational, this unity was profoundly psychological, producing an almost unpredictable effect. It was an unprecedented shift, triggered by the incident's crucial role in capturing modern sciences to prove that their unshakable belief in humans, working for the same cause, have an innate bond because they share a common knowledge of their suffering, became the cornerstone of their power, and the Dominion's ignorance of this change only strengthened. Their inflexible mechanisms intended to keep an eye on and quell rebellion failed to acknowledge the emotional and changes in the human population's psychology that they still saw. Because of this misunderstanding, humanity was able to be easily controlled and fragmented. The unwillingness to expand undetected, enhancing its skills, and honing its tactics without intervention. Since humanity lacked the resources to focus on traditional warfare, rather than immediately opposing the Dominion. It took use of its inventiveness and flexibility. By infrastructure, flaws in the empire, the inflexible Dominion structures that had been their greatest asset became their weakness. Human ingenuity, these systems' opposition to their designers, causing anarchy and instability in the empire. This change was characterized by the appearance of people who personified the wrath of humanity. These were not regular people whose lives had been permanently changed by the Dominions, rather than typical leaders or military personnel of some kind to persecution. Their tales struck a deep chord with the human resistance, motivating others to stand up and combat. These figures turned into representations of defiance and hope, directing humanity's collective rage into targeted action. These people's motions and behaviors weren't impulsive or haphazard. Rather, they were well-planned. Key elements of the Dominion's control were targeted, and the opposition was destroyed. Methods interfering with communication networks in supply chains and other vital systems, these operations aim to methodically destroy the systems rather than just wreaking havoc. Frameworks that maintain the Dominion's authority with every achievement, no matter how little shown to humanity, that it was not only able to fight back, but also to prevail, which is what made this force so tremendous. Because of its unpredictable nature, the Dominion was able to effectively handle uprisings from various peoples. Most rebellions were put down quickly because the species was unprepared for the unique nature of humanity's insurrection. By the superior resources and technology of the empire, but humanity declined to adhere to this pattern. Their opposition was dispersed over several locations and tactics rather than being limited to just one. Fronts that almost made it difficult to ignore the psychological effects of information security were just beginning to be espoused in 2016, and they had to seek help somewhere. For the first time, the Dominion's authorities had to face the fact that this resistance was significant, meant that they could not completely control it, grew more powerful every day, and destroyed the fear of the Dominion's invincibility. Once its most significant weapons, knowledge that they were up against an adversary motivated by a nearly primal urge, suddenly worked against them. Because the authorities became uneasy as the rebellion increased, because of the desire for retribution, other persecuted species who had been silent for a long time under the opinions range started to be aware that humanity's struggle became a focal point for all those who were fighting for their own liberation, who had endured the oppression of the empire, and this wider appeal provided the campaign with more impetus as support and funds started to pour in, as did the Dominion's attempts to stifle and isolate humanity from unanticipated sources. Only helped to increase awareness of their conflict, so undermining the empire's authority. The distinctiveness of the mix of human feeling and strategic accuracy was what made humanity resistant. This was not a chaotic uprising, but a purposeful and concentrated attempt to attain freedom. The motivation for this was a common co-recognizing the stakes. People fought not for political dominance or territorial dominance, but this clarity of purpose gave them a level of resolve that allowed them to fight for their right to exist on their own terms. The Dominion's inability to understand or overcome humanity's tenacity in resisting was also a result of its adaptability. Human mobility was flexible in contrast to the Dominion's hard buildings, able to adapt to shifting conditions and grasp chances when they presented themselves. This adaptability permitted them to keep the initiative going, which will keep the Dominion off balance and prevent them from launching a successful counteroffensive. Was a conflict of resolve rather than resources, and the humanities will turn out to be ultimately the result of this change was not only the Dominion's decline, but also what started as a desperate fight for existence turned into human empowerment. The resistance evolved from a movement that reinterpreted what it meant to be human to one that went beyond simply toppling the projector, which was the goals of Dominion, and created a future where the goals of Dominion were taking a back seat. This larger vision gave the movement a sense of of purpose that went beyond short-term successes, guaranteeing its durability and integrity. Despite having greater military and technological capabilities, the Galactic Dominion was unprepared for the Force. It had unleashed their incapacity to comprehend the extent of the wrath of humanity, and the power it provided was their destroying their kingdom because they had depended on intimidation and control. But these strategies were ineffective against an adversary who, motivated by anger, tenacity, and an unwavering commitment to their cause, the beginning of humanity's transition from oppressed victims to a single, unstoppable force of a new age that would alter the galaxy, end quote. Reinterpret what power meant. Humanity's rise to prominence as a force that could contend with the Galactic Dominion paved the way for an unexpected revolution. What started as isolated acts of resistance had developed into an all-encompassing struggle. Despite its enormous resources and technological advantages, the Dominion was suddenly confronted with a full-scale conflict. Confronting a foe unlike any it had faced in the past, humanity's unwavering resolve driven by. The fight changed from a simple rebellion to a war of retribution, after years of suffering. This was a deliberate attempt to destroy the systems of oppression and retake control, not just a struggle for survival, autonomy. The conflict progressed in phases, each distinguished by notable changes in tactics. And concentration? The early stage mostly depended on guerrilla warfare and asymmetric warfare. Without the sophisticated Dominion, humanity's arsenal and fleet capabilities allowed it to use its inventiveness to attack where the Empire was most. Communication networks and vulnerable supply lines were interrupted, undermined these initiatives, causing confusion within the Dominion and forcing it to redirect resources away from its former haunts. Although these early successes were not definitive, they showed that its more important priorities. The insurrection had the potential to cause significant harm, and as the conflict dragged on, humanity's attempts became more coordinated, formerly disparate factions that now functioned as a single force. This transition is linked by a Shar vision, and a vast communication network enabled the opposition to expand its activities and undertake coordinated strikes on several fronts. Efforts were made to reveal the Dominion's weaknesses to other oppressed people in addition to weakening it. The tenacity of humanity served as a model for subsequent upheavals. The uprising was no longer a regional dispute. Rather, it had spread throughout the galaxy. Becoming a movement that endangered the Empire's very foundation, the Dominion's reaction was expected, but, thus, using its tried-and-true methods of repression, it used overwhelming force to destroy the rebellion. Whole planets were positioned, and warships were deployed. However, during martial law, these actions merely made the resistance stronger. The harsh methods used by the Dominions alienated not only humanity, but also other species that were subject to its control. This misunderstanding allowed for what was supposed to be a display of strength to instead illustrate the boundaries of its control. Knowing that the Dominion was not, humanity should struggle on with new vigor. Invincible. This stage of the conflict was distinguished by humanity's capacity for innovation and adaptation. Conflict taught the resistance important lessons that allowed it to improve its tactics, whereas the Dominion used standardized methods. Because of humanity's dispersed structure, adaptability, and inventiveness, which provided the rebellion with a clear advantage as it might react to local developments faster than the bureaucratic structures of the Empire over time. Enabled humanity to level the playing field by using superior tactics to offset the technology gap and resourcefulness. The conflict was not without difficulties, and the superior dominions, every victory, came at a heavy price in terms of firepower and resources. Numerous lives were sacrificed and towns were destroyed over time, but these sacrifices only bolstered humanity's determination because every setback served as a reminder of the stakes. The resistance fighters realized that victory would strengthen their resolve to fight until the end. Would not come lightly, but they were prepared to go through whatever difficulties were required in order to accomplish it. As the battle intensified, the rebellion started aiming for more strategic goals. Instead of concentrating only on interfering with the Dominion's functioning, humanity turned its focus to breaking down the systems that kept it powered, including energy hubs and manufacturing facilities, in a series of coordinated attacks intended to undermine the Empire's capacity to... In addition to undermining the Dominion, these strikes showed the increasing sophistication of the resistance in the Central Division. Humanity was taking the initiative and pressuring the EMP Empire to stop fighting in a reactionary manner. React in accordance with the internal organization of the Dominion, which was formerly regarded as a symbol of its might turned into a weakness, when humanity relentlessly attacked the inflexible hierarchy that ruled the Empire lacked the capacity to handle the fragmented and dynamic character of the rebellion decisions, that layers of bureaucracy delayed necessary urgent action, giving the resistance crucial time to capitalize on its benefits. This inefficiency, along with the growing strain of the conflict, caused rifts in the Dominion's leadership, and conflicts between various groups within the ruling elite started to surface, making it even harder for them to react. Appropriately, as humanity continued to press its advantage, the conflict reached a pivotal moment, and the Dominion misjudged the tenacity, and due to its adversaries' ingenuity, it was forced to defend important areas that were open rebellions that had previously been strongholds of imperial rule. The loss of these areas not only broke the Dominion's idea of invincibility for the first time in its history, and undermined its strategic position. Throughout history, the Empire had to face the prospect of its own demise. Humanity's capacity to come together and maintaining its efforts was evidence of the rebellion's leadership's determination. Despite being dispersed, this clarity of purpose kept the ultimate aim of liberation front and center, enabled the resistance to endure defeats, and adjust to shifting conditions with the help of other additional resources, and manpower were supplied by species that were influenced by humanity, significantly shifting the balance in what had previously been an insurmountable obstacle was now within the rebellion's favor, as the Dominion's power started to reveal that the effects of the war went beyond the current combat and were essentially altered the galaxy's dynamics, undermining the Dominion's hegemony and igniting a wave of opposition throughout Ross's lands. Humanity's struggle was about more than just toppling an empire. This message, which demonstrated that even the most oppressed can rise against insurmountable circumstances, struck a chord with people far outside the galaxy's political and social environment is being altered by the battlefield. Despite its advancements, the rebellion realized that, although still weakened, the battle was far from over. The Dominion had a lot of resources and would not give up easy. The war's last phase would need even larger sacrifices as humanity attempted to strike a final blow on the Rakesh Empire, but the resistance now had a strong advantage in momentum. Once the pinnacle of unstoppable might, cosmic dominion was now a deteriorating shell of its former self, reduced to its knees by the very people it had attempted to control. This conflict was more than a simple conflict of armies or ideologies. It was a battle for humanity's soul, and the rebellion's triumph was evidence of the strength of solidarity, fortitude, and the unwavering will for freedom. What started as a last-ditch struggle for life had turned into an effort to reshape the galaxy's destiny. The demise of the Galactic Dominion was unavoidable. As the foundations and fissures widened daily, the relentless humanity and its allies' resistance had not only revealed the Empire's weaknesses, but also destroyed the Dominion's authority. Was reduced to a collapsing structure by the systems that once upheld its tyrannical control. Unable to bear the burden of its enormous holdings, the last phases of the power system were vastly exhausted and united against the Dominion, resulting in the collapse of the struggle, as humanity moved from protecting its existence to the rebellion's success in actively regaining its future. Came from more than just tactical triumphs. It also came from its capacity to release the Dominion's psychological grip on its citizens, who had been terrified for ages. Main instrument of control that suppresses entire communities, shattering humanity's defiance. Other animals are being inspired by this delusion to rebel against the status quo. Once the dominions were united, they started to further split up each rebellion, reduce the empire's authority, causing a chain reaction that accelerated its demise. A number of significant failures characterized the dominion's decline, with its centralized structure intended to guarantee the bureaucracy that once enabled order to govern large areas became its biggest weakness. It suddenly made it more difficult for it to react to the quickly growing problem. Resources were overburdened, and communication failures made its leadership ineffectual. The rebellion took advantage of these flaws, which attacked important areas and further undermined the empire. Leaders who had been shielded from the reality of their realm for a long time were unable to adjust to the evolving nature of the fight. Beyond its military triumphs, the rebellion had changed humanity's role in the fall of the dominions. This wider appeal turned it into a movement that stood for freedom and hope for innumerable oppressed people. The opposition received legitimacy from the dominion's inability to oppose the backing of other species. More manpower, resources, and strategic advantages, which started as a battle for freedom. In the wake of the war, survival had transformed into a coalition bound by a common goal of liberation. With the fall of the dominions came a mixture of triumph and problems. Filling the void left by the self-determination was made possible by the breakdown of centralized authority. But it also presented substantial dangers when the structures that had previously repressed humanity were destroyed. However, this created a gap that needed to be closed, and the reconstruction effort was monumental, involving not just the infrastructure repair, as well as the creation of new governing bodies. Now that the yoke of oppression had been lifted, humanity had to decide how to define its destiny. Addressing the effects of the conflict, which had left entire planets devastated, was one of the top objectives at the moment. The cost of liberation was high. Millions of lives had been lost, and the wounds took generations for the conflict to be resolved. Therefore, efforts to rebuild were concentrated on laying the groundwork for long-lasting peace and prosperity, which required not just structural repair, but also resolving the psychological and social effects of years of war and oppression. The tenacity of humanity, which had been its strongest suit during the war, now served as the impetus for its recuperation. A sense of responsibility was also introduced by the liberation. Whereas the rebellion had considered a worthy cause, the strategies employed to win the battle were not without moral dilemmas, and the devastation caused by the conflict had far-reaching effects on innocent masses, as well as the Dominion's rulers. Caught in the crossfire, humanity's leaders understood how critical it was to recognize these difficulties, in making sure that justice and reconciliation, not retaliation, defined the post-war era. Strategy was essential to preserving the backing of its allies and averting the emergence of new conflicts following the collapse of the galaxy. The power vacuum left by Dominion signaled the start of a new era for the galaxy as a whole, as well as for humanity. The fall of the Empire opened the door for the emergence of new political structures, with humanity having a purpose in the forefront of this change and played a crucial part in the rebellion. The challenge was not just to reconstruct, but also to guarantee that the new order was essentially distinct from the one it. Achieving this necessitated striking a balance between attending to the urgent recovery requirements and creating the framework for a destiny. The rebellion's experiences taught the post-war era important lessons about a sustainable and equitable future. The solidarity and fortitude that had kept humanity afloat during the war served as the cornerstone of its new identity. A sense of unity that overcame differences was fostered by common hardships and sacrifices. This unity was essential in tackling the difficulties of reconstruction and making sure that the errors of the past weren't reiterated. Humanity's capacity for innovation and adaptation, which had been crucial to its victory in the conflict, was now vital. The wider effects of the Dominion's collapse were felt throughout the world as they navigated the complexities of peace. The demise of centralized authority throughout the galaxy gave marginalized species the chance to recover their autonomy, but it also came with serious concerns because many regions were left without a unifying force. Susceptible to instability in this new period, humanity's leadership role was both an accountability and a chance. Its deeds would establish the tone for the post-Dominion order. Impacting the course of galactic diplomacy and administration, the legacy of humanities beyond the conflict's immediate results, rebellion signified a profound change in the dynamics of the rebellion's strength and defiance had shown that even the most repressive structures could be overthrown and demolished. This word spread well beyond the Dominion's borders, encouraging freedom and justice movements around the galaxy. The triumph of humanity was not merely a victory over an empire, but a demonstration of the continuing strength of fortitude and solidarity. The difficulty of creating anew was completely overshadowed. After all, maintaining order necessitated striking a careful balance between meeting immediate needs and making plans for the future. The leaders of humanity understood the significance of developing inclusive, equitable, and sustainable, which meant not just dealing with the war's immediate effects, but also making sure that the mechanisms established were able to withstand future difficulties, and the rebellion's experiences offered a roadmap for overcoming these challenges that highlights the need of flexibility, teamwork, and shared purpose. The post-war period was marked by cautious optimism, but the difficulties of frustration, there were enormous opportunities for a better future in both governance and reconstruction. Significantly, after enduring and conquering unspeakable adversities, humanity faced these challenges with a quadruple effort. The lessons learned from the past, which were forged in the furnace of resistance, provided a newfound sense of purpose, a newfound energy, and perhaps a most essential discovery of all: